started. All right, cool. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Welcome for joining us on this Thursday afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you're located. Today, I'm Jan. I'm the head of the HubSpot operations community. Super excited for today's live event, brought to you by myself, the HubSpot community, and in collaboration with RevPartners. They're a HubSpot solutions firm specialized in helping companies grow with revenue operations. And they've been hugely successful in doing so. And one testament to that is that they're HubSpot's fastest growing solutions partner. I think they were the fastest to reach platinum and also diamond, I think in less than 5 months. So that's pretty amazing. And one reason why they're growing so strong is because it has a large part to do with this man here, Matt Bolian. He's the co-founder of RevPartners and obviously also an incredible thought leader in the field of RevOps. If you aren't already, be sure to follow him on his LinkedIn. Always, his posts are always very exceptional and thoughtful. And we have him, of course, here today with us. So thank you for being here, Matt. I won't take up any more of your time. The floor is all yours.
After that, Jan, thank you for inviting and setting it up like that. I appreciate it. I am excited to have everybody here. Let's get into it. We got a lot to cover. So let me make sure got my screen ready. And now we got it started. Let me make sure I'm presenting. Okay, so appreciate it. This is the RevOps Manifesto. So we got a lot to cover. I'm going to skip this slide. In general, I already got a bit of a introduction. So who am I? I went to the military academy at West Point. From there, I was a military intelligence officer for about 6.5 years. And then getting out, I've run some revenue operations departments. I'm a former Salesforce fanatic. I've had Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics, where I was running a CRM for that. And then now founded RevPartners this year. The company, our mission in life is to democratize revenue operations. So it's to share the gospel of how to do RevOps well with anybody and everybody. Just that is our mission. That's why we exist. So just some parts. Yes, we're the fastest to diamond. Some other points. I really like HubSpot. It found me, and I'm a convert now. I have over 30 certifications with that, and everybody on the RevPartners team has at least 10. Just something about RevPartners. Okay, so this is what RevPartners does. We help people build revenue operations engines. So I'm going to go into is the very premise of how do you create the frame of the car itself, not just the engine, but the frame of the car, and the very basis on which revenue operations is going to be based. That's what we're covering today. That's where we're going to spend our time. And we're going to spend very specific, very actionable ways to revenue operations to make your company increase will be able to scale. This is the agenda, not spending much time on this, but you're going to see is we're going over 8 tenets, and we're going to spend time on those tenets. There's going to be an introduction and there's going to be an end. So let's go with that. First, let's make sure we're framing the problem. And so here is just a big picture. Recognition. RevOps has been recognized now this is the competitive, and there's 2 words there, but this is the competitive differentiation. Right, people are going to win or lose based on how well they're executing revenue operations. It's not a question. There's a shift then in the question. It is no longer, should I do revenue operations? It is, how well do I do it? The fact is, every company is doing revenue operations. You can't have a company and not do revenue operations. It's just, how well are you currently doing it? One of the big issues is, especially as you go and Google search and you attempt to say, how do I implement revenue operations? You're going to get these very heady, very theoretical, extremely conceptual definitions. They're like, it is about decreasing silos in order to decrease friction in the flywheel. It is about having all the same KPIs so everyone's aligned on the same goal and thus decreasing friction. It's like these but what do you do with that? How do you actually start doing revenue operations? So I'm going to spend our time today. It's like, as part of that is, let's just recenter for a second on what the heck revenue operations is. And let's start creating a guide and a path towards just like the very fundamentals. Let's just start doing the basics. So number 1, let's recenter. RevOps at its very fundamental, most base level, when take all these definitions out, and I'll even use an analogy for this, but it's like, it's revenue operations. Doing revenue operations is holistic. It's like everybody's doing it. It is behaviors in a business that create actionable data. Let me repeat it. It is behaviors in a business that create actionable data. That's all revenue operations is. I mean, the next part is like using the data to be able to drive revenue, right? Like that's the final part, but let's not focus on that final part. We get so caught up in the final part, but like before you can even have the data, you must create behaviors. You must have the behaviors that create the data. So that's what this manifesto is. It's about creating data. Now let's use an analogy, and I think it's funny. I'll use soccer. So I would use football if it was just an American crowd, but use soccer. Is like the fundamentals of soccer is you need to make progression up a field with a ball to score a goal. But you must be moving forward. And to play the game, you must have cleats. And to play better, you must have shin guards. And so this RevOps manifesto is, we're not talking about the tactics of how, or the strategy of what type of formation I should be running and to win the game. We're talking about how should I tie my shoe? You need to make sure you have cleats on when you play. You need a goalie, and because you have this goal and you need a goalie there. We're going to go to the very base fundamentals. And so this is going to be a guide with clear, simple, practical behavior-based tenets. And this is the foundational layer of RevOps. Let me just show a visual with this. So we are the people at the very bottom, the hikers going up this path. And there are different tiers of processes, and I call RevOps processes. And I'll show you what those look like in a second. But at the bottom in the base is these processes cannot function well if these manifesto and these behaviors are not occurring. I'd also say, and I don't have this drawn here, is that these processes from RevOps Manifesto Tier 1, Tier 2 to Tier 3 have revenue bands. So from 0 to 2 million AAR, this is the manifesto. Like you need to be doing these well. From Tier 1, from 2 million to 10 million AAR, like that's when you're starting to implement those tiers. What we're not in the Tier 2 is 10 million to 25, and Tier 3 is 25 and above. What we're not doing is talking about anything above Tier 1. I mean, anything above revenue, the RevOps Manifesto. Let me just show you this. So when we go in and we're talking to clients, or I'm talking to friends about running businesses, I will always talk about these processes. Let me just visualize it. So this here is the most base foundation and processes that are occurring within a B2B company. Now there's some missing, right? We don't have a channel go-to-market. There's not a product. This is not PLG. It's not product-led growth. This is a B2B SaaS company that has an outbound and inbound function and then sales ops. So these are starting to represent your Tier 1 and your Tier 2 functions that need to be occurring. But what they're not this manifesto. They are not these base behaviors that need to occur. And these base behaviors that occur will actually feed into your other processes that sit on top. And if you're not doing the revenue manifesto, these processes here will be very difficult for you to be able to execute your Tier 1, Tier 2 process as well. Okay. Without further ado, let's get into the revenue manifesto itself. Okay. This is the manifesto. I think you've all seen it. If you had, as part of the marketing to get here, what I'm going to do next is we're going to go through every one of these tenets. We're going to talk about the significance. We'll talk about the application and then give an example of what that looks like. I'm going to repeat these out loud because these are good to repeat because they need to be done. Number one, I recognize this truth. Adoption is greater than process, is greater than tool. Number two, I shall run a weekly sales pipeline call in my CRM. Number three, I shall manage my sales from a dashboard in the CRM. Number four, I shall decrease the number of databases I use. Number five, I shall draw my processes. Number six, I shall measure marketing by revenue. Number seven, I shall eliminate Excel, Google Sheets. And number eight, I shall hire a RevOps resource. We're going to go through each one of these. and why these are important, how you specifically make these enact in your company or help your clients be able to do these, and then give examples. Let's start with tenet number 1. This is the most important tenet. It is the fundamental, and every other tenet creates, incentivizes, and amplifies adoption, and rest upon this one. So we say, I recognize this truth. Adoption is greater than process, and process is greater than tools. So let's talk about this for a second. Significance. I want to make sure this is clear. Let me start with this way. The traditional logic is you need to draw your process, and then based on your tool agnostic, draw your process, and then based on your process, select your tool. I'm going to challenge that. That is not the way to select a process. The way to select a process is because why? Why is that not the way? This truth, without adoption, if you don't have people doing your process, it does not exist. So I don't care what tool you pick. I don't care how great your process is. If people aren't doing the process, it doesn't exist. It's just a waste of money. So this comes down. So there's two other significances. Simple processes are better. So what happens is when we only focus on the process is we put every single feature we want in it, which means those tools that have more features win, but they aren't always the most easy to use. So it leads to this truth that a tool and the tool you select matters just as much as your process. So it's not that you should just pick any tool, but that your tool actually informs what decision it is. So let's put this and make it very actionable. And how do you make this tenet and put it into your tech stack today? Number 1, track adoption of tool. If you're not doing that, this fundamental is the people that are supposed to be using the tool to do the process, are they using it? It's a yes or no question, and you should be able to show in some way that it's doing. In HubSpot, for instance, you could use activities, and just as easy as emails activity. Are people logging emails? Are they logging notes? Are they creating contacts? And you can start to see, and it's a really good judge of activity itself, or tracking adoption of tools. And then you use this to then be able to have conversations with those that are not, and assist help and prioritize training events or what needs to be trained. That's application number 1. Number 2, just as a point, is whatever process you create, whatever tool you select, 25% of the journey, 75% of the journey is adoption. It is the most important point. Selection is application use. When you're selecting a tool, your adoption is just as important. That as a selection criteria, as is it easy to use, is one of the most important parts of the selection itself, and you want to start incorporating that. So what does the end state look like when this tenet is being done? That means every marketing, every salesperson, and even you start to have your finance, perhaps even if you're putting HR and you're putting applicants in, but you have multi-departmental adoption of a CRM. Now, this is better in HubSpot because you can have free users and everybody can look at the data, but this is what you're driving towards at any point. It's what I was working for when I had a Salesforce instance. It's what I was looking for when I had a Dynamics instance. Is end state is 100% adoption. I just put this as another visual. Adoption's a flywheel, and there's an adoption flywheel. Adoption, process, and then the tool feeds the adoption. So just don't forget about the adoption is the most important tenet. All their tenets fall within it. Tenet number 2. This is funny. I shall run a weekly sales pipeline call in my CRM. And you notice a few things in this tenet. It has a specific cadence in it, meaning weekly. It says the word, and then it has CRM. So this presupposes that someone has a CRM they've selected. And a CRM doesn't give a tool. It's just saying you have a CRM. So I don't, at this point, when I'm doing tenet 2, I'm not being prescriptive here, right? I'm not telling you which CRM to choose. It could be Excel, it could be Monday.com, it could be whatever, but you need to have a pipeline call. you need to weekly, and you need it in your CRM in whatever mechanism that is. Now, why? Adoption. Again, all about adoption. This creates pattern and consistency. The rhythms let your entire organization know when data is most accurate, so they can then schedule when they're doing their reportings and how they're going to communicate to the board, manage up, manage down. And then this is the third point: is whatever process you're picking, it requires training. It requires repetition. And so you need a forcing function, and the most fundamental forcing function that will drive revenue from a revenue perspective is the weekly sales call that will, and it creates an organizational strength around updating and having data correct. And you need this. It is forcing function. It's so important. From an application perspective, how do you do this now? Again, this is all super basic stuff, but this is like John, let me give you an example. John Wooden, the famous coach from UCLA, he won 10 national championships, and he would have the best of all athletes from high schools in the United States want to work for his play for his team. And the first day when they came in, these celebrities essentially would come in, and he would teach them how to tie their shoe. So this is one of these points. Run a weekly sales call. This is tying the shoe of revenue. How do you apply it? Schedule. If you do not have a reoccurring meeting with your sales team, schedule it right now while we're on this call. That number two, this is something you can never skip. If a VP or whomever is going to run the call is not going to be there, do not cancel it. You have someone else step into the role and run it. That will, again, create repetition and create organizational strength and begin to multiply and allow you to scale. And then it comes to timing. When do I start this weekly sales call? What if I only have 2 people? What if I have 3 people? You start as soon as your sales team is greater than 1 person. And the best day is at the beginning of the week. So a Tuesday or Monday are traditionally when they're done. I personally do Tuesday because Mondays tend to be holidays. And so Tuesdays are less apt to be skipped because I follow the application of not skipping. In state of this, when this tenet is being followed, it is a predictable timeline for data integrity in the CRM. That is so paramount for all other operations in the business. And it may seem small at the beginning, but it becomes more, it has a agglomeration effect, negative effect, and it creates lots of friction if you're not having this specific thing done each week. Okay, so I'm just giving you application in my life. So this is from February 8th, 2022. We have this plan. We are doing our pipeline on the 8th. We have that 2 p.m. EST. We are running our pipeline review, and it occurs every Tuesday, no matter what. And this is something we do at RevPartners, and it's something we highly encourage everyone that we talk to about sales and marketing to be able to do. Okay, now moving to tenet number 3. Related to 2, it starts to get a bit more prescriptive here. I shall manage my sales from a dashboard in a CRM. So last time I just said we need to have a reoccurring meeting. Now we're getting, okay, now we get into the visualization of this. And manage is a very important part. And so again, significance, adoption, most important part, and this will drive it, is you can only, what you inspect is what you expect. If you want someone, and if you want your data to be correct, you must inspect it. So this dashboard must have every report, every question, and be very specific with close dates or whatever data that you need to capture, that it is being inspected publicly with all the sales team. Next significance is this starts to create, as we are the trust in the data that the sales teams created. So one of the fundamental problems with an adoption is, I'm going to take these headphones off. One of the problems when you get people to trying to get people to adopt a system, especially as you're getting multi-departments, if you're getting marketing in, you're getting finance in, is they don't trust the data. They don't trust sales teams' data. They think it's not true. So is this done well is going to start to create institutional belief and trust in the data that's being done. And last is the assisted accountability to hold your reps. And so being very specific, it's like, what is your close date? How have your close, like, are you being successful in predicting your close date? What is your push rates? Are you adding and associating contacts? Are you making sure you have your titles in? Do you have forecast categories done? And so you're asking these questions and you're putting it publicly to make sure. Now, the application of this is you have one dashboard and you use that dashboard every single time you run this weekly call. It's the same exact way, presented the same exact time, and with the same exact next one questions every single week. So you ask the same questions so people know what to expect because you're inspecting the same thing. As a rule in their application is if the deal's not updated, if it doesn't have the correct amount, if the product's not in, if the contact is not there, it does not exist. And so this is just another application, and it is if the data is not in the CRM, and then this puts it, if it's not on this dashboard, then whatever you're talking to me about, salesperson or whatever, it doesn't exist. The fourth is best practices to have a leadership board you're going over. You can drive competition, healthy competition among teams. And you'll be able to see who's doing what, and perhaps even be able to look for training opportunities. At the end of a appropriately run, where you have a sales call with a dashboard, at the end of this, you're able to say, will we hit our target for the month or for the quarter? Based on whatever your sales cycle is. So I'm going to sit on this one for a bit because we have a very prescriptive way that I think that has, and this is 85% of the time, this is the way to run. And I'll provide this. We'll provide this post webinar for you to have. So we have and I won't go into this, but we have a very specific dashboard we're running in HubSpot that we use. I have a full video walkthrough of how we organize, and then how the questions that we ask as a VP of sales or running this sales call would say. We also have a full document that I'm going to spend some time going over here for a second, just so we're thinking about this. So I'm not going to go into the definitions of each report, but what I'd like to do is go over each of the sections. So a really good, well-run sales dashboard has these 4 sections. Number 1, you have an executive review. And the reason you want this is the executive view is going to give you the ability to say, hey, this quarter, or whatever your sales cycle is, this quarter, I can make the expectation of what is our low, what is our base, and what is our high. And you can give ranges of outcomes on where we're going to end based on the deals in the funnel. And so the questions you're asking is the question you're attempting to ask through this section is made up of several different reports, is, are we going to hit quota? And so when you're done with this section, you should be able to answer that question and know what you need to prioritize your effort for the rest of the week or the rest of the month if you're going to hit it. Section 2, we call the deal review. What this is, it is showing what's been closed lost this past week. It's showing everything upcoming that's going to close in the next 30 days that allows you to make sure the real deal, there's no pipeline fluff that's in it. You're able to ask what are the major deals and be able to identify any reps that need help in order to close a large deal through. And then last is, in general, this deal reviews. Again, these are several reports, but the deal review as a section also answers this question: are the deals real? Because we do not want fake deals, because they affect your ability to be able to have your outcomes correct. Next is your top of funnel review section. And so this is about, are we generating enough pipeline? But also, if we're currently not going to hit our quarter, you need to be able to bring some of the top of funnel deals down into your quarterly forecast. So the whole point of here is, hey, what deals can we bring that are currently on they're just starting in the funnel? What can we bring in to commit that will end this quarter so we can hit our goal? And the last is your leadership. And it's going to show you trends. So it's going to say who's closed the most revenue, who has the most activity for this quarter. who has the best close rate, who is, from a push rate perspective, who is not pushing their close rate, who's the best at forecasting when something's going to end. So you're asking all these same things over and over again. So I'll share this. This is actually the reports that are used in this section. I'm not going over those now, but this is one of the paramounts. This is as a tenant. This is a tenant I think people at organizations tend to miss often. So that's why I spent time going over it. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to the next tenet, and it is I shall. I love this one. This is one I get very excited about. I shall decrease the number of databases I use. Now, we live in a world where there are, I think in 2020, there was 8,000 different sales and marketing tools. It's probably 15,000 now. I mean, it's exploded. There's a tool for everything from whatever function you're doing. And I just want to be clear here. We need to be extremely careful about what databases we add to our tech stack. And the reason being is adoption is part of RevOps is this core is you only need one, you need one source, or wherever possible, you're trying to consolidate data into one location because you're creating actionable data. So the more data you're able to create in one location, the easier it is to create actions and trigger actions that will decrease your decrease sales friction. So the less places things are, the better it is and the easier it is for you to move fast. Every database you add, you are increasing the admin burden, right? Like now you're having to manage integrations between two different systems. You're not able to have your team specialize in tools that they're going to use well. So for instance, sometimes it's difficult to visualize data because they don't know how to use the tool to visualize the data. You're going to have to rely on consultants more often. And there's an exponential amount of spend for every database you add. Be careful here. And this is, again, adoption. It makes your processes more difficult and your processes become more complicated than the adoption, than your tools. You have more tools and then your adoption decreases. And all of a sudden you don't have everybody that's adopting 100% in your tool. So adoption is something we should be monitoring all times. And then tenant one is taken out and now your house starts to crumble. So be careful on tenant number 4. And just remember is decrease databases where at all possible. Now let's do an application here. So we talk about a CRM and I said CRM, get one, but at this point, as you're scaling and you're thinking about it, at this point, you should be, okay, I need to start looking for a true CRM that can house my data and be able to allow me to move fast. And I want to, and this is like the next application is probably the easiest, is find a CRM where you can combine, because these are these are the easiest ones to combine, your marketing automation platform and your customer relationship management platform. So you could do that in Pipedrive. You can do that in Insightly. You can do that in Mixmax. You can do that in HubSpot. So you just need to make sure that this is just a rule is I put, if I'm advising companies is put your sales and marketing data in one database and do not use separate tools to manage those. End state with this is multiple departments are doing reporting from one system. So a good use case here is when sales and marketing are doing both of their reporting from the same database. Now I'm going to show you, just going to visualize this. So, because we got to think about it, RevOps too, is you're looking at an organizational structure of all these different databases. So here's just a few databases that are very common. If you're looking on the left, is database 1, CMS. You have your website and it is collecting data and it is executing processes that are feeding your marketing automation platform. That marketing automation platform is going back and forth between your CRM. You also have a sales team that is perhaps doing outbound, and they're doing outbound through a different platform like Outreach or SalesLoft. You then have your CRM itself, where your sales team is living. but they have to create proposals, or they're doing their pricing and quoting in a separate database where they now have proposals. So your contract management is now in a different database, and your CRM, whatever's closing, you have a finance team that is using an ERP system for billing and managing invoices and collecting billing that inside their database. And then we want all of that. We need to consolidate all that data into some data visualization tool like Looker or Power BI to be able to know what the heck is happening in your business, to look for trends. This is what I mean by creating actionable data. This is not complex. Like, you don't see website chat here. You don't see, I'm looking at sales engagement. You don't see, there's several different databases I didn't even put here. And this is how most modern B2B SaaS companies are run. And it makes it very difficult. Look at all the friction. Every one of those transitions is a friction point that occurs. So you look at the right, or you could pick a system like this. Now, I'm biased to HubSpot. I love HubSpot. This is why I love HubSpot. This is why HubSpot turn a Salesforce fanatic and a Dynamics user into a HubSpot fanboy. It is. You put your CRM, your map, your sales engagement, your CRM, your CPQ, and you can even do some of your data visualization inside one system. By the way, the users are free, except for unless they have a paid seat. Like, what's not here at all is your service delivery team, right? That's other databases. So you just, as a point, anytime you have an opportunity, make sure you're decreasing your databases. And that's so important at the beginning, to choose a platform that is not creating all this friction, because it just will slow you down so much. And that's why I'm a HubSpot fanboy. Okay, move to tenet number 5. I shall draw my processes. Okay, now this is again, this is all about adoption. You just as a point, as a person, if you visualize the process and you can follow the process step by step, it's easier to follow it and thus adopt it. It's foundational to training. As an improvement, as an onboarding, I just have the onboarding, is it decreases ramp time, because people can, not only are they shadowing you doing whatever your process is, they also have they have some other point where they can see what's happening, and they can connect the dots and decreasing ramp. And that is so powerful to be able to move fast, increase revenue, especially as you onboard more sales reps. You have a new CSM, you bring in a new marketing person. Talk about improvement. It's really difficult to improve something where we can't visualize what the bottleneck is. So this is a point on the RP team. If anybody asks a question and they say, I don't know what to do, and it is more than 3 steps or more than 2 steps, I just ask the question, have you drawn this? And if they haven't, then we stop there. They go draw it before they come back and we can answer the question. Is draw everything out. It will help you move faster, not slower. So how do we do this? Application. Number 1, sign up for one of these 2 tools. No one's paying me to do this, by the way. Miro or Lucidchart. I'm using Miro right now. I create, and I'll show you, we draw every process out at RevPartners inside Miro documents. We draw for our partners. We draw them for ourselves. And it's just who we are. His processes are drawn. Sign up for one of those tools, start using them. I like, if I had to pick one, I would tell you Miro, but both of them have their pros and cons. Next is pick a process. And so I recommend starting with the sales stages, to be honest. So you can say, okay, are my stages from the buyer's journey? Do I have all my entry requirements done? Do I know activities are being done by a sales rep? Do I know the documents I need? So at the end of this, I'll also add, we have a Miro template that we use to help people think through that. We'll put that as another thing we're adding to this. But just, that's the number 1, but there's so many other processes. Your sales to delivery handoff, your onboarding process. If you're a PLG moment, you're probably already drawn all this, and you know every customer touch point. And the next is as an application, is you're never going to have enough time to draw your processes. You probably don't have a RevOps person on your team. And so you're constantly coming up with new processes. You're constantly implementing something. You're constantly changing something else. So what's the use of drawing it? And by the way, I need to drive revenue. I don't have time for this. You're never going to have time to be able to draw processes. It's not sexy. You're just never going to have time for it. Recommendation, block time add people, do it. I'll say it again, block time, add to calendar, add people, do it. Force it. It will provide so much value just to get processes done, make a checklist, and start having goals for every month to draw one process a month and just get it done. End state. The best case here is all customer touch points, specifically from, and I have sales to delivery, but specifically marketing, sales to delivery is done. And then that will just beget more processes for you to understand. So that is the end state of this tenant. Let me show you an example. Is for RevPartners specific is we have a Miro account. And so we have multiples. We have an account for every partner we work with. But for us, we consider ourselves a partner or client. And so we have every process. Becoming lethal is our onboarding process. We like, how do you become lethal? How do you get really good at RevOps? Staying lethal is the next part. So how do you maintain that? That's our quarterly reviews. We have a big master process that has every one of our processes done. And it goes on and on and on. We have our full strategy document all inside of Miro, right? We have everything, we draw them out. Next is onboarding. Is we have just an example. If you take this onboarding, this is part of that master process. Is we have all our onboardings, every specific action, whether manual or not manual, what decisions and what throughout the entire process is all done and visualized. Green means it's done. Yellow means we're improving it. And red means it's not done. And so it allows us to know where we're at, where we're going. Okay, it is 11:37. I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers. We got 3 more tenants to go through. Tenant number 6, I shall measure marketing by revenue sourced. So this is really important. So the old way was measuring people by MQLs. So I'm going to challenge it. So adoption is again, every one of these tenants begets adoption. So if you are measuring marketing by the revenue they have influenced or the revenue they've sourced at the end of the customer journey on a closed won deal, several things will start to happen. Number one, marketing will be hounding your sales team. They're going to start putting data. They're going to start asking about when something's going to close, and it will create, it's just another forcing function that's happening outside of formal realms to make sure things are done. And they're going to ask like, hey, do you need anything to close that? Do you need me to update? Oh, you need me to update the proposal? Sure, I'll update the proposal because I know it is. Everybody starts working for the same team when you're judging them by the same goal. It creates the focus that I just talked about. People are focused and able to prioritize better when they're not thinking about schemes to get more MQLs, and they're focused on the ability to close one revenue with customers. This gets to the next is it's instead of focusing on customers, instead of focusing on generating MQLs, they're actually focused on like closing a customer and then being able to identify and be able to like the quality of whatever they're generating through marketing will be better because they are thinking about the customer, and they lose if they're not generating revenue. And it's just a beautiful thing. Last is innovation. And this comes from is the dark funnel is such a powerful thing. The dark funnel being is you're unable to do any contact attribution in a community. For instance, if this webinar here or from the community, I can't do attribution if it's going to lead to any set, but I know this is a good thing. Like I should be doing this thing. And so we just need to be able, like there's dark funnel events and communities and how you're engaging that are not attributable by contact. Someone may watch this. My point is, stop worrying about contact attribution. Allow marketing to do some fun things. Like for instance, we have a podcast. We invite people to our podcast that we think would make great customers. I don't care who looks at it ever. And so, and we've had podcast invitations, meaning like we had a podcast guest with someone that was in our funnel, help close them. And so marketing help close a lead, it will beget innovation and not go to the tried and true MQL lead gen that we're used to. Application, stop asking marketing about MQLs. Now, it is important to understand. It is important to define. It is important to trigger. It is important to track, but it is not the defining revenue on which all is seen. Add marketing to your sales calls. So we now have these sales calls that are occurring, have them there. And when we think B2B attribution, it's a bit more important for e-commerce. It's a bit more important for PLG, but for B2B attribution, focus on the deal level, not contact level. So sales and marketing are together, and they're starting to identify the multi-touch journey of a customer and how we're touching them, and put it at the deal level, not necessarily contact level. Contact level is used for marketing to understand what's working, but it's not the end all be all, because contact level attribution marketing is fundamentally just under attributed in a sense. So the end is marketing and sales actually like each other. I know it's crazy. It can happen. This is a great end state here. Okay. Going to tenet number 7, I shall eliminate Excel, Google Sheets. Now there is, I see, Jan, you have your hand up. I want to make sure I'm not skipping into something.
No, that was an issue on my bad. Continue.
Okay.
Please.
Well, I love you raising your hand. Okay, here we go. So I shall eliminate Excel, Google Sheets. So again, all about adoption. Hopefully I over communicate this. Adoption. But this will help you do adoption better. The fastest way to destroy an entire RevOps department is a rogue Excel that has gone out. And then especially when an Excel document has more accurate data than the CRM itself. That anytime you see an Excel spreadsheet, we need to be asking the question, why? Like, and not persecuting people that are using it. It's just asking the question fundamentally, hey, why aren't you using the CRM? Why aren't you using this program or this tool where we're collecting data to be able to execute what you're doing? So this is the point, is every Excel, yes, it's if rogue long enough, it will mutate into a destroyer of adoption in your CRM. So be careful. However, you can also have them, you can graph them into your CRM, and it represents an opportunity for a process that's not currently being done to eat that and put that into your CRM, and for more people to increase adoption of the CRM. Because if people are using Excel, there's 3 reasons. It's number one is the data is not in the place. So one place, meaning there's 2 different systems. And so they're having to taking data and they're manually putting them together through if they're really fancy, they're using SQL joins, right? They're transforming the data. So it's not in one place, meaning data is collected in 2 different systems. And so there's no integration happening between those 2 systems, or it's not accurate. Number 2 is they can't find the data, meaning whatever data that we need is not being collected well enough, or it's not accurate. Number 3, it's just a training issue. And so every single one of those is an opportunity to enhance the CRM in your RevOps department or your RevOps motion itself. So application. I did not update that application. Application is just, I kind of said this. Application number 1, Excel. If you see it, ask the question, what is wrong? How can we help? And so every time you see one, just ask that question over and over. If you're using Excel yourself right now, get with someone that knows how a CRM is done and say, hey, how can I include this into one place and be able to put them together? Number 2 application is, hey, what's your end state? What question are you trying to answer? So everybody that puts an Excel together has a fundamental question they're trying to answer, and there may be a better way to answer it. And you can lead them to answering that question inside the CRM or the source of truth that you have. So the end state of this is data collection, data processing, and visualization all occurs in one tool. So don't let a rogue Excel exist in the wild for too long, or it will come and it will eat your family. So here's an example. I just took HubSpot's thing here because it's beautiful. It's like, hey, you have this Excel file. It's wicked awesome. And that looks like a pretty darn awesome Excel file. However, only 3 people in the company know how to use it. You're not getting all the data that you need from all the users. It's not fully adopted. It's not on mobile. It's only on your, right. There's all these reasons you want to make sure you're converting. Okay. It is 11:45. Let's get to the last tenet. Now this last tenet, and I say this is why we started RevPartners, because I recognize this tenet is so important. It's in a foundational level. and it's about adoption, is processes need constant iteration and growth begets complexity. So it's like every process you have needs to be iterated. A process that worked for 2 sales reps doesn't work for 3, doesn't work for 4. You add a sales manager. Now you need territories assigned. You need different commission plan. Every process you have needs constant iteration, and you need someone that knows how to wield a CRM well. Next is the RevOps is now becoming a profession. The ability to make processes simple, the ability to make the ability not only to make processes simple, but the ability to get people to adopt whatever process you're using is a skill set. And there are best practices on like, here's the way you do it over and over again. Now this is, and it's being, this skill set is now like there's best practices to be implemented. Don't reinvent the wheel. Bring someone that has done this before onto your team to help execute it, and you will be able to move faster. So as an application, you can do it yourself. Now, if you want to do it yourself, we did another whole webinar with the HubSpot community, which is how to hire a RevOps Jedi, which talks about what questions should you be asking, how should you be scoring them, what are the core competencies that you're looking for. Go watch that. You can do the whole hiring process yourself. For instance, RevPartners, the only people we hire is people that are making a practice and making a profession out of RevOps. So we've tried to get good at this. Hire RevOps as a service. There are a lot of these companies out here, right? RevPartners is one of them, but there are others. So I'll just name them to make sure everybody gets a little love. You got like Hubble Digital. They have a RevOps department. Remote-ish in the States, in California, they help do RevOps. And there's a bunch of these HubSpot partners that are and non-HubSpot partners that are helping and starting to professionalize, bringing people and offer this as a product to be on your team for essentially for the cost of one full-time employee. You can get a full RevOps department to be able to do. And so this is the reason we started the company. This is why we exist. Number 3 is you can work with a RevOps recruiter. So this will help you find the right talent, ask the right questions, and dramatically decrease the likelihood that it will fail and just increase that they're going to be on your team long-term and you have the right person. Now, the one I recommend, the one we've used in the past, is called RevSearch. Probably, I think it's one of the top in the US that we've actually used for us because we define as we've had so much demand, we've needed to increase supply quickly, and we've outsourced a few of those hires to RevSearch. So the end state here is your sales friction is reduced and a value of a new hire is increased. So let me explain that. Is if you are incorporating RevOps as just part of who you are, is every new hire you bring in a new sales rep, you bring in a new CSM, you bring in a new sales manager, whatever you're bringing in, is there's this person or people or department that are thinking about processes, thinking about tools, and their whole point in life is to make sure that we're doing behaviors that create good data and good data that make good decisions. It will, it's so important. Look at, I think visually we need to put it here is you have 2 ways to increase this flywheel speed. Is you need to increase force, which means hiring more sales reps or more marketing people, or you can decrease the friction, right? The decreasing friction is hiring RevOps people. And the earlier you do this, the better. And you need to be thinking about this earlier in your stage, because it is modern B2B companies. It is, I would say even e-commerce companies, like, so it is the aspect of your business that will make you more competitive than others. I think that is a point is, I think Forrester did 2018. It was in 2018 before RevOps had really exploded. It is hiring a RevOps department for a Fortune 500 company had a 2.7x lift in revenue, which is crazy. Okay, final words before we start Q&A. Just as we think through these, start simple, do the basics well. And you can almost, the tenants stack on each other. And I will provide a by tenant, by application checklist so you can check through them, but just do the basics well. Don't try to conquer the world. You don't boil the ocean. Just start simple. You eat an elephant 1 bite at a time. Start simple. Next is don't skip. Move fast, but don't skip. You can do a lot of these tenants and start creating these behaviors, but don't skip any of them. If you skip one, it will decrease adoption, and it's all about adoption. Behaviors take time to change. So we can't expect someone, if we just started running a sales call or we're just asking, like it takes time for people to get in. Be disciplined, iterate. This is fundamental to RevOps as a point. And it really depends on what revenue band you're in and where you're at, but your solution today is your problem tomorrow. And so if you don't have a RevOps person thinking through that, and you don't have these base fundamentals that are helping you stay rooted, your solutions that you created yesterday will become the issues you have today and will drag your revenue down and will increase friction. And you need the function, you need the ability, you need the valve to decrease friction. Okay, I'm putting my headphones on so I can hear things. This is for Q&A. We have the list of the tenants we went through. And now I'm going to open it up. Jan, I think you're moderating, and there's two ways people can do questions. It can be in the chat, or they could have the potential to do it live. I'll help you pick, and you tell me which questions to answer, and I'll start there.
Yeah, we don't have that much time yet, so I prefer if people would put their questions in the Q&A. But if you really want to share, feel free to click on the raise hand feature, the feature that I used a couple of minutes ago and wrongly, and then I'll be able to unmute your mic. But yeah, feel free to put them in the chat. I already wrote a couple down. Let me get my notepad here. One was by Chris, and that was regarding the sales pipeline tenant. Is it done in adjacent to one-on-ones or in place of, is what Chris was asking at the time.
Yeah, here's my recommendation here, and I'll share my screen. I'll do this live. We have a full function for this. I'm going to go as quick as possible. So your sales. So when I'm thinking about doing these, this is a whole. Okay, when I'm thinking about doing these, is a point. Is the weekly sales call is the fundamental thing. So it's not, yes, it's adjacent to, but like as we're thinking about what comes first, what is the thing you need to be best at? It is the weekly sales call. And then you're starting your sales rep tracking, your one-on-ones to be able to help them. So like at the beginning, if you're 2, 3, 4 people, your weekly review is your sales rep tracking. But as you increase, you're able to create a sales rep tracking. And just make this other point, your sales weekly review, if done well, should look almost exactly like your sales rep tracking. So the same thing you're covering on one-on-ones is the exact same you're covering on weeklies. And that will decrease the friction and increase revenue in general. And so we have templates that we use for that. And hopefully that answers your question. I'll stop there, Jan, so we have more time for more questions.
Sorry, still muted. There was one more by Ray in the chat. Ray asked, is attribution really worth the time to figure out and gain alignment on? Or do we just measure marketing on inbound meeting requests and the associated closed won ARR?
Yeah, so if we're thinking about these in principles, right? So it's worth doing. The question is, when is it worth doing? So and when we talk about attribution, we're really talking about the contact attribution and then the deal, like the trigger, which is your last touch attribution. And so what I'm saying is, your last touch attribution, or like first touch, is your attribution, meaning what led to them to think about you in the first place, is extremely difficult for us in the modern day community engagement, LinkedIn world, personal brand world, for us to be able to monitor well. And so where you capture the information is during a meeting. It is a question a sales reps ask. And so there's it's to confirm whatever your CRM is tracking. So that would be my recommendation, is that is what you focus on. And so, yes, you get a meeting booked, but why did they get that meeting booked? Is still an important question to ask. Just don't rely on your CRM to get it for you. Make it a question. And then once you have enough time, you can eventually go back to better understand that journey. But it's just not that when question of understanding the full journey is only after you understand the contact attribution at the very, very beginning, just through deal source. Hopefully that answers your question in a way that provides value.
Cool. There was one question here I see in the Q&A by April. Do you have experience working with, older salespeople who are tech hesitant? How would you increase adoption in that situation?
Yes, yes. Specifically, we have some, and I want to call, I'm not going to use any names of any of our clients, but we have specifically like in manufacturing is a good example, or healthcare is a good example, where they've yet to start adopt some of these modern RevOps principles. And so the way you do it is slow and methodical and deliberate. And so I make example, we made 40 videos of very small actions of create contact, associate contact to deal, update deal. And so recommendation is break every action into very small ticket, very small things in a video, compile this video, put it into a Google Drive where they can look at it, or Loom is what we use. Next is what all people know how to do is email. And so if you're doing a CRM and you want them to adopt it, is show them how to use their CRM and email, and or whatever function they're using for the emailing, Outlook or Gmail, probably Outlook if they're older. And if you can teach them that, you'll win their hearts and minds every single time. Once you teach them how to do email, they love you.
That's a great advice. Okay, I hope that answered your question, April. There was one question by an anonymous attendee. What RevOps resources or community do you recommend keeping connected with?
HubSpot community, no doubt. Yeah, there's five that we actually I'm actively monitoring in. It is Modern Sales Pro, Wizard of Ops, Revenue Genius, RevOps Co-op, Pavilion. It's a paid one. It's a good one if you're in. And the last one is there's another one I forgot, but those are good ones. And those are all the ones that I'm actively participating in, and questions that you can find. And by far the best is the community, the HubSpot community, no doubt.
Making me blush. All right. One question by Bruno. I'm today in charge of B2C sales ops who have more than 7,000 clients. Do you have any specific recommendations for sales ops, RevOps for B2C? And he added to that, the way I found to help me doing that is creating as much properties as I can so I can be very personalized with my customers. Yeah,
so B2C, it's all about understanding. So that is where contract attribution is extremely important. So number one, understanding the full journey of when they first interact and how they're executing. That's number one. Then number two is for B2C, it's much easier to understand segmentation because you can start collecting those, especially through progressive fields, whatever. And so as you're going through, it's just like making sure you're collecting all the information, able to segment at very minute details. So the more you can segment based on their customer journey, the better. And so it's all about segmentation for B2C. And yeah, it's all about segmentation. So I know we have time for one more. I want to make sure you have time.
Let's see there's several more. I'm not sure if we can get to all of these, but I'll make sure to put them on the community and I'll have Matt answer them there. Let's pick the top one here. Most upvoted. Whom do you think would be winner in future RevOps as a service or RevOps intelligence platforms like Clary or Clary? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get the question. It's like, hey, should we invest in Clary? Do we need RevOps department? Let me just, who orchestrates Clary? Your RevOps department does. So who makes sure all the Clary only works if people are inputting their data correctly and the data is all there and orchestrated and then visualized and then told. Who runs the reports? RevOps. Do the same thing. The whole point of our revenue intelligence is as you're growing larger, I call it a tier 3 process, to be honest. So that's like above your 10 million AAR, perhaps even 25 million AAR. It's like, it's doing the insights that you can't see and feeding that earlier so adoption increase. And so it's just a point. They are separate. One is still administrating it, thinking strategically, make sure all those insights are getting put in and getting adopted. And that's the RevOps. That is the function of the RevOps department. So they work together.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's all we have time for. I'm very sorry for all the other questions that we weren't able to get to, but rest assured, we will be able to answer them tomorrow and the day after that, next week probably. You can find, I'll put those questions in the link that I put here in the HubSpot community. You will also find a recording there as of tomorrow, and I will also send an email, hopefully tomorrow, but more likely early next week, with all of the resources and all of the things that Matt talked here, and also the recording as well. But that said, we are already over time, so thank you very much, Matt, for delivering this amazing presentation. A lot of people found a lot of value in it, and I'm just delighted to see that. So thank you, and I hope we can do many more of these in the future.
Where's that? Hey, everybody, do it big and stay awesome. Adios.
Bye.